to South Orange Library's Special Conversations. I'm Laura Sims, and I am really happy to be back doing this program after our hiatus while we moved from our old location to our new temporary location. And it's great to be here with author Dionne Ford. She is here to talk about her wonderful new memoir, Go Back and Get It, a memoir of race, inheritance, and intergenerational healing. You can get a copy of this through the Buckles system, or you can get it wherever books are sold. And I highly recommend that you do. It's a beautiful memoir. And I'm really excited to be here talking with her about it. I'm just going to tell you a bit about Dionne, and then we will get to the book. Dionne Ford is an NEA Creative Writing Fellow and the co-editor of the anthology Slavery's Descendants: Shared Legacies of Race and Reconciliation. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, LitHub, New Jersey Monthly, Rumpus and Ebony, and has won awards from the National Association of Black Journalists and the Newswomen's Club of New York. She lives in New Jersey, even though right now she is in Kansas City at a writing conference. So thank you so much for being here, Dionne, all the way from Kansas City.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Oh, thank you. I was hoping, I love the book so much, and I was really hoping you could tell us a little bit about it, give us a little bit of context, and would you mind reading the prologue?
I would not mind at all. No.
So
Sure.
beautiful.
So just to give you a little bit of context, I learned about my great-great-grandparents on my father's side when I was a little girl, when I was 12, from my grandfather, and him telling me about them just kind of like lodged in me. And I always wanted to find out more about their stories, especially about my great-great-grandmother, Timpy, who had been enslaved. And so years later, when I found a picture of them on the internet, that just set me off on an odyssey that helped me really uncover specifics and details about their lives, especially Timpy's life, and also connected me to some of my uh, distant relatives who also share them as ancestors, as well as descendants of the enslaving part of that family.
Right, right. Yeah. How long did it take for you? Like, how long did this whole odyssey take, start to finish?
I mean,
Maybe it's still going on in some way.
right. Absolutely. I guess, if you don't count when I was 12, if you
Okay.
start from when I found the photo,
Yeah.
I would say, so that's 2007. And I'd say until about 2012 was when I was actively uncovering information and researching.
Okay.
Um, and then I think I count the writing part as a little bit of a different story. So research wise, 2007 to 2012.
Okay. Okay. That's substantial.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
you kind of stumbled on this picture.
I did. So like I said, finding out about them when I was 12 was uh, something that I would return to, whenever I thought about it, I would do something, whether it was send away for a death certificate or once the internet came along, do a Google search, using all of the information that I could find. And one of those instances, doing the Google search, I did find this photo just by typing in the information that I knew, which was my great-great-grandmother's last name, my great-great-grandfather's last name, where they were from, which is Ocean Springs, Mississippi, which is where my dad was born. And then up popped this photo.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing. And would you mind reading the prologue? Do you
sure.
have that?
I
That'd
would
be
love
great.
to. Thank you. You just call it up because I'm traveling. I didn't bring the
Oh,
actual
right. I
physical
didn't
book.
even think about that.
So, so I will just read it from off my computer, if that's okay.
Okay, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my prologue is called A Relation. If you are going to look for your enslaved ancestors, you will have to look for the people who enslaved them. Any African American can expect that 19% of their ancestors were white men, so the enslavers might also be your relatives. This is a study in contrasts: shadow, light, black, white, joy, pain, victim, perpetrator. You will find ephemera, editorials, photographs, wedding announcements, and atrocities, lynched uncles, your people as property in someone's will, deed, or mortgage guarantee. You will also find the living, third cousins once removed, fifth cousins straight up, and descendants of the family that forced your family into slavery. You will meet them on beaches, in dusty archives, in farmhouses, scratching at the past like it is a lotto game, and you are strokes away from a million more reasons to believe. For a time, you will cease to believe in or pray to God, and instead will pray to your ancestors, the enslaved ones, the women, because they are what you want to be: mother, creator, feminine, divine. They were raped. They were sold away. They kept on living. Some even thrived. If you are going to look for your enslaved ancestors, you will have to reconsider the word lucky. In 1858, when Colonel W.R. Stewart, a wealthy Louisiana cotton broker, married Elizabeth Macaulay, a girl from a long line of North Carolina plantation owners, her family gave the couple a slave named Tempy Burton as a wedding gift. Elizabeth was sickly and couldn't have children, but Tempy could, and did, have 6 of them with her new master, the Colonel. My great-grandmother Josephine, born a decade after slavery ended, was their youngest child. On my 38th birthday, I found their picture on the internet. It was May 7, 2007, and with those sevens, I'd like to tell you that I was feeling lucky. Tempy was in the middle of the photo. Her former masters, Elizabeth and the Colonel, were sitting behind her. On either side of Tempy were 2 biracial-looking girls. The one on the left was curly-haired and creamy-skinned, like my dad and my daughters. It was eerie how the century-old photo of my ancestors mirrored the new family I created. Lucky and unlucky number 7. In 7 days, God made the world. In 7 plagues, God could wipe it out. On the 7th of May, I was born. In my 7th year, I was raped. It's been said that it takes 7 years for every cell in your body to change. In the 7 years after finding the family photo, I crisscrossed the country, uncovering the stories of the people in it, and a breach began to mend in me. There's a name for this kind of pilgrimage. The Akan of Western Africa call it Sankofa. Symbolized by a bird in flight with its head craned backward and an egg in its beak, Sankofa means to go back and get it, or it is not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten. Thanks.
Mm, wow, that is gorgeous. It's like a prose poem, that
Mm,
prologue. It's
thank you.
really, it really just it's so gripping instantly and really sets you up for the experience of the book.
Oh, thank you
Mhm.
so much. I hope to
Welcome.
educate people with it.
Yeah. I know you talk and you get into this a little bit in the prologue, but you talk about when you are diving into your ancestors, looking for your enslaved ancestors, you find your ancestors enslavers and how those are also sometimes relatives, right? And how you find yourself, this is later on, you talk about you find yourself opening up to their humanity even while you're considering their brutality. And I was wondering if you could just talk about the challenge of that as part, because that's a huge part of this book, right? This
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is challenging. I feel like it mirrors the challenge of just being an African American in this country. Um,
Mhm.
this is home, and yet, in many ways, this home has not really necessarily embraced me or my ancestors. And
Mhm.
so there's that similarity in uncovering this history. These are my blood. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. And at the same time, they oppressed my family as well as being my family. So it was super challenging. I would find myself having judgments about myself too. If I did have a moment of feeling like, oh, wow, this is some really interesting thing that my enslaving great great grandfather did, or seeing him as, someone who was very good at being a businessman, and then quickly remembering, and a part of his business was selling and, enslaving people. So it was constantly holding these two tensions.
Right.
And yeah, it was very challenging, very
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. And I was wondering at what point you decided to turn this whole journey into a book. Did you always have it in your mind? Like, oh, this could make, I know you've been a writer for a long time. Like, when did you have the idea of like, oh, this would be a really fascinating book, or it's something I want to write?
I think, even as a young person, I always aspired to write. When I was younger, I thought more visually. So oftentimes when I would think about writing projects, I would see them in the medium of film or TV. But
Mm.
then, I became a journalist. So,
Mhm.
I would say not long after I found that photo, I began to think of how to tell this story beyond just telling it to my family. Um,
Mhm.
and then once I connected with another descendant of Tempe
Mhm.
and the Colonel, my distant cousin, Monique, and she had such a similar life as I was living. She was also from New Jersey, also married a white man, also had two daughters.
Mhm.
Um, that's when I knew that I had a book. Um,
Right.
that's when I knew that I really wanted to tell this story as a book. There was something about the generational experience that seemed important.
Yeah, absolutely. And did it, I know that books often you start with one thing and it becomes another thing as you're going along. And I was wondering if that was the case for, you were telling the story of your family history, but you also incorporate your own personal incidents of trauma. And I was wondering, was that always part of the mix, or was that something that kind of developed as you went along and wrote the book?
So, um, I think somewhere very, very far in the back of my mind, they were always there because I do think now that that was the draw for me.
Mhm.
The trauma that my enslaved female ancestors experienced was a sexual trauma, and mine was also the same, and it happened when I was so young. So I do think there was something in me that was making that connection even
Right,
before I think I was able to articulate it fully.
right.
Um, but that was not my initial intention. When I thought about writing the book, I was really thinking about writing the story from this experience of being in a mixed marriage, but of choice,
Mhm.
and paralleling it to, the mixed heritage we have, but one that was not necessarily of choice because, Tempe was an enslaved woman. So I
Right.
was really initially looking at it from that perspective.
Mhm.
But really behind that, is sex.
Right.
And so it brought me back around to the idea of the sexual violence.
Mhm.
Um, that
Mhm.
both my ancestors experienced and that I experienced, but in different ways.
Right. And was it difficult for you to think about like sharing that in such a public way in a book? And, I know you've done a lot of press for the book, and I'm curious if it has been very difficult, at least or has it also been part of a kind of healing, since it is a book that is about healing. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
mhm.
So, as you'll know, when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking about anybody reading it. And I think I needed to do that in order to say everything that I needed to say. It's
Yeah.
very easy with this kind of information, whether it's about the sexual violence or even just the violence of slavery in and of
Hmm.
itself, to
Hmm.
want to censor because it's difficult. And so I had to really try not to think about anyone ever reading it so that I could just get down everything that I needed to get down. Um, and as far as now, yeah, I don't want to, how do I say this? Yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but
Right.
not really for me. It's more, but the discomfort comes, in my opinion, for other people. I
Right.
know other people get really uncomfortable about talking about sexual violence,
Yeah.
um, how prevalent it is. So that's more the issue for me, is other people's discomfort. But what's been
Right.
a really wonderful balm to that is receiving emails from folks who say, I read your book and this happened to me too. And thank you, thank you for acknowledging this real
Hmm.
issue, that continues to affect people. Or like one woman um, who I had known, I knew, but didn't know that this happened to her, you know, um, and other people saying that they were, um, someone wrote me to say that she'd gone to her first survivors meeting after reading my book. So that's all I want, I mean,
Right.
that's everything, to think that
Yeah.
something that I said could be helpful to somebody. So
Right.
that's been the thing that's helped me to deal with the discomfort around this very
Yeah.
sensitive.
That's great. Yeah, that was my next question, was what kinds of reactions and responses have you had? And it sounds like people have reached out, and that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And and of course, a lot of people reach out to say that they have a similar family history. They
Oh,
are
right.
descended from enslavers and enslaved people. Or I do also hear a lot from people who are white and who are descended from enslavers. And I really appreciate that too. It's not easy to do
Mm,
this research, um, particularly if you are descended from the enslaved. A lot of the information is really hard to find.
mm,
So I appreciate if this is in any way encouraging to people or helpful, maybe gives them ideas about ways that they can do their own research. So yeah, I've loved hearing from people, and
mm.
that it's, in some way useful or just encouraging to them.
That's great. That's great. I really loved the switching a little to the formal question, but I really loved the small chapters that you use, and how a lot of them stand on their own, like that prologue, like I said, to me felt like, a prose poem that could just stand on its own, but they all come together into this beautiful cohesive whole. And I was wondering if that was something that evolved as you were writing the book, or was it very conscious? What was your process, I guess?
So I think it's both. So oftentimes the way that I tried to write the book was very, like, I would try and write something as soon as so like, for example, if I went to a archive and found some
Mhm.
information, then as soon as I found the information, I would try and write my real-time response or reaction to the information.
Okay.
Um, and sometimes those were often very condensed, very compact responses. And so later, as I was developing the book and the structure of it, I actually didn't, I was trying to find a way to stretch all those things out, not, keep them. It was my editor who really felt like many of those interstices were, their own fully realized piece. So
Right.
it was her intervention, and I was just kind of showing her those things as we were moving through the editorial process, saying, okay, this was my response to when that happened. And she felt like, oh, these are actually wonderful transitions. So it was both. I wrote them, but not
Right.
necessarily thinking that they would be a standalone piece. I wrote them early
Right.
on. So
Okay.
that's the help of a good editor.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And were there memoirs or other works that were influential to you that you turned to when you were writing or inspired you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I've always loved Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Yeah.
Um, Such a beautiful memoir.
Mhm.
Um, and oh gosh, I feel like there are so many.
Yeah.
To be able to remember them all. I also really loved Ta-Nehisi Coates' memoir, Between the World and Me,
Oh,
which is
that's
something I read much later in my process. I was kind of like
okay.
already through, a couple of drafts by the time I read that book. But it's very compact, and
Mhm.
I felt like it was very instructional about how to kind of convey something quickly and not belabor the point.
Okay. Right.
I felt like he did that really well, particularly in handling his tension with his father.
Okay.
Um, so those are two that just come to my mind off the top of my head. There are, gosh, so many more. I can't believe like now I'm totally
I
spacing.
always I do the same thing. Somebody asks me, "Oh, who are your big influences?" I don't know. So, so don't worry about it.
I'm so
If
sorry.
you think of it as we go, you can just insert it in a question. Um, what was the most profound revelation for you along this journey of
Well, it's hard for me to pick. I will say probably the thing that has lasted with me the longest was that Tempe was looking for her family so many years after slavery was over, and posted a what's called a lost friends ad in the newspaper trying to find them. So
Mm,
after slavery ended, lots of Black churches um, would would read these lost friends ads from the pulpit because a lot of, obviously formerly enslaved people couldn't read. So
mm,
the
mm.
minister would read these ads aloud from the pulpit um, to help people, find if their family was looking for them to help reunify folks.
Mhm.
And so my great great grandmother posted an ad in the Southwestern Christian Advocate that was a Methodist Episcopal paper for Black Methodist Episcopals in New Orleans. And this was, many years after slavery had ended. It was the 1890s. Um, and so it was just very, very moving to me that, in her freedom, her family was
Mm,
at the forefront of her mind still. the ones that she had been separated from through slavery, and that she would be trying to find them, you know. Also, it was very precious because it now gave me the names of her
Mhm.
mother. This brought me back another generation, you know. Now I
Right.
had the name of my third great grandmother,
Wow.
Eliza, you know, and I could
Yeah.
see that she had aunts, you know, and they were named. I could see who her siblings were. She named all of her
Right.
siblings, you know. So it was
Mhm.
just very precious on both levels. That family was so important to her, as it
Yeah.
obviously is to me, because I was spending all this time trying to find them. And that
Right.
in a similar way, she, 100 years before me, was doing what now I was doing too.
Yeah. It must have been incredible to find and connect with these new family members through this whole process. Are you still in touch with most of them? And
It was so special to connect with my um, cousin and her children, who my kids became friends with. They were all around the same age, and to be able to do this somewhat, you know, painful work together, you know, we had a lot of fun, and the kids, you know, really loved each other and had a blast. And my cousin is very creative, and she was a very good cook, and she would make meals that connected to our family's history. And um,
wow.
yeah, she's a big, very crafty, you know, so there was always a theme, you know.
My
Um,
God.
yeah, so it really made this difficult work, it brought some ease into it, you know. And
Right.
so I'm not still in constant contact with her. Um,
Okay.
but you know, my kids do still reach out to her kids and vice versa. So I think, you know, over time, like it's painful, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
painful work. So
Right.
um, so yeah, so but we did stay in pretty good contact for quite some time after, even after we were kind of done, you know, doing all of the research.
Right. That's great. I'm gonna pause and just see if anyone has any questions. If you have a question, let me just um, unmute people, or I'm trying to be the leader here. I'm not very good. But if you have a question, raise your hand and I will unmute you. If not, I have more, but I just wanted to pause and see if anybody had a question or a comment.
Okay, I'm gonna eat something. I'm really hungry.
Okay. Okay, maybe not. Nobody? Okay. I just want to make sure. It's
I have a lot of questions, but I can't quite formulate them very well.
okay.
I I guess I don't know. I guess because I also teach a lot of this like in like for history, and I think it's such the like relationship between the personal history and the country's history is so complicated. I guess I'm just curious if you talked a little bit about this, but if you're comfortable sharing this, like, did all the research like help with the healing? Like, I guess I'm interested in that, like, sort of process, like, or do you, like, I guess I'm curious, what's like, if you have regrets of looking into this, of, like, what helped and what, if there's stuff you learned that actually made things worse. And if that's too personal of a question, I don't feel like you have to answer it, but I think it's really interesting in any context to try to figure out what healing looks like in this context particularly. So it just feels so ambitious, and I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have no regrets. There's not one thing that I learned that I wish I didn't know. And I mean, I learned about a lynching, and I'm still grateful to know that story. Um, so it was extremely healing. I would say mostly because when you're dealing with enslaved people in this country, so much of the damage that's been done for those of us who are descendants is the erasure of their story. And that's from actual documents, that aren't accessible or or don't exist, or them, our ancestors not being named, just being kind of slash marks on somebody's ledger, So to give them back their humanity by just unveiling the specifics of their lives, how they lived them and how they ended, whether it's tragic or not, is very, very satisfying and very healing. So yeah, I don't have any regrets about anything that I uncovered. I, wish I could know more. I feel pretty good about what I was able to uncover. I feel very good about connecting with so many people from a variety of experiences, whether it was the descendants of the enslavers or my, blood relatives, my like cousin, and even, organizations that are also trying to do this difficult work. That just was very gratifying to me that people understand the importance of really acknowledging the full picture of our country's history and trying to acknowledge it together, I really appreciated that. So yeah, absolutely no regrets, and it's all been super, super, super healing. Yeah, thank you.
I think there's another question.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, is that me? I don't know if you can hear me.
That's you.
It is.
That's Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I've got okay, low battery. I'm Steve Joseph. I know Laura from the library. I'm enjoying this immensely. I don't know as I have as a question more than a comment. My first wife was Black and Native American, and I was very involved with that family since my own family disinherited me, or at least my dad did for about 7 years. I was prodigal. So I've been tempted to write, and I'm a writer and an editor. I'm tempted to write an autobiography, but I am not, maybe because of suffering a lot of depressions over the years, I'm not that interested in my own story. I'm interested more in other people's stories and reading them and hearing them. And as I say, I do write, and I have published a number of books, but I'm wondering why you chose the autobiographical path. And did you think it would be painful? Did you hope to learn? Did you want to share? I mean, what were the reasons that you chose the form and published this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my training is as a journalist, so I'm not usually the subject, and the reason why it was important to me, and I knew this before I formulated the idea to write the book, I wanted to know my family's history and I wanted it to reach other people, is because, I do feel like they are America's history. They're just the regular people that built this country and continue to be pushed to the margins of our story. And so it felt really important to me to give these just normal folk, not extraordinary folk, not people who saved 7,000 other people or invented, any cure to, some disease, just the regular people whose blood, sweat, and tears is in the soil, that felt really important to me. Regular people who found ways to continue through this oppression by turning to the church or whatever it is that they did. In my family's case, it was that, you know, they were very religious, and I'm sure that that was a way that helped them move through this pain. And reach for aspirations. So that's why I did a personal story, because I felt like it was important to acknowledge just simple folk, you know, and ideally also acknowledging that not everyone will have the privilege or the skills or the resources to do this kind of work. To hopefully also reflect back to people that your simple ancestor is also, you know, integral to this fabric and important. So.
Mhm, mhm. Great. Thank you for the questions. Have you ever considered writing in another form, like in fiction, or are you working on anything new?
So,
Two questions.
yeah, that's two questions, but they're the same. So I actually have my MFA is in fiction.
Okay.
And I went to NYU to get my master's in creative writing and fiction, and left with this memoir. So it was, I was supposed to be writing a novel, but my ancestors would not stop demanding to have their story told. So I diverted. So now I am returning to the novel that I actually went to NYU to write all those years ago.
That's cool. That's great. Oh my gosh. Is it historical fiction or
Well, now
totally?
at this point, it would be considered historical because it
There's been so
takes
many.
in 1985, and I hear that that is now considered historical
That's
fiction.
ancient history.
Yeah. So, so
Oh, that's funny. And have you noticed a difference in writing, like between the autobiography and the novel? Do you feel like it's a really different process for you?
yeah, I mean, this is so much easier to write fiction.
Okay.
Like, I don't have to worry about, I mean, I guess people could get mad at you over fiction, but I don't have to worry
They,
about
they do.
real people. Yeah, yeah. Um,
But
but
yeah,
hopefully not my family. So,
right.
you
That's
know,
right.
who
You
knows? We'll
can
see.
hide behind the veil of fiction.
And I get to fix problems, you know. I don't have to be beholden to the truth. So I, you know, if some character thing is not happening, I can just, you know, make them a blacksmith as opposed to a, you know, a auto worker or whatever. So
That's perfect. That's perfect.
yeah.
And what is your writing process or your routine that you have? Are you a very regular writer?
I was once upon a time.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm teaching creative writing, and I have to say it's really challenging teaching and
And
also
right.
writing. So I try to stick to a writing schedule on the days that I'm not teaching, which at right now is only 2 days a week. So I try to be deliberate about teaching on those days. Way back
Okay.
when I wasn't teaching, I wrote every single day, and I wrote 3-hour blocks seemed to really work for me, you know.
Okay.
Those were the days.
Oh gosh. But you can also, I feel like, get a lot of inspiration from teaching,
Oh my gosh.
that ultimately feeds your work,
That is
even.
absolutely so true. Reading, you know, going through and reading a book and then dissecting it with my students and hearing their observations is always an education and always so stimulating. They're fantastic. We just read Tess Gunty's book, The Rabbit Hutch.
Oh, I've wanted to read that.
Oh, it's fantastic. And she's going to come and speak to my students. So we're really all excited.
That's
And
great.
yeah, and hearing them talk about, you know, just the themes that she explores in the book and how she does that and the different craft tools she uses was really, very inspirational to me. And I did take away a couple of things that they pointed out and thought, I think I could apply that to my own work. So you're absolutely right that it is very inspiring. It's I
Yeah,
think pointing
even
that.
though it sucks up your time and your energy, right?
It does. It both is energizing and as well as, can be a little depleting. So finding the balance, I think, is where I'm focusing a lot of my mental energy right now.
Oh yeah, I bet. And so now that you have published a book, what was the most surprising part for you of publishing a book? Anywhere along the process, either while you were working on it or when it came out?
I think the most shocking part for me was how much work you have to do as the author to promote your book.
Right.
I I had some crazy notion in my mind that once I finished and turned it over, that I would just see people, when I had another book to talk about, and that would be the end of it. And that is not the case at all. Um,
No.
there's a reason why marketing and publicity is its own major in college, because it is really a very nuanced skill,
Yeah.
um, and a real, it's a full job on its own. So I really appreciate all the work that my publisher's team put into doing everything they could to spread the word about my book. So, and I'm trying to keep up and do whatever, I can to help. But there's so many titles, so many great titles, so
Yes. And they just keep coming out.
just keep coming. They just keep coming.
Oh my gosh. And do you have any, speaking of all the titles, do you have any book recommendations for us? Like books that you've read recently? I also blank out on this question. So if you can't think of what you've recently read, I understand.
Well, I mean, we did just finish Tess Gunty's book,
Okay.
and I thought it was brilliant. I understand why she won the National Book Award. It was
Okay.
very fresh, and
Yeah.
also the best part of it, which is for me the most satisfying kind of book, is it was an actual conversation with the reader, which is, to me, that's the chef's kiss of any book, when it is actually like inviting the reader into really
Mm,
thinking about all of the themes that are being brought up,
mhm.
and then kind of really speaking with you,
Right.
she does that. She does
That's
that.
cool. Like letting you have room to kind of collaborate almost with the book, like not giving you everything on a platter, that kind of book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That I love that. A lot of readers do not like that.
Really?
They want to have everything out on a platter. I found, I don't know, but
No,
I
it's
really
not that
love
things are,
them.
it's not that things are like unclear. It's just that there's
No,
this room, that
right.
could be kind of investigating yourself, The
I
way that
love
it's written, it does make you be self-reflective.
That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for writers?
Yeah,
Like
read a lot.
aspiring writers? Read a lot. That's great advice.
Read a lot.
Yeah.
And even if you are feeling like you're struggling in your writing, just stick to a practice. Even if the practice is like writing for 15 minutes, um,
Yeah.
stick to the practice, because it's not really rainbows and inspiration. It's really like, in my opinion, most of the writers I know, there's a lot of just getting the words down,
Yeah.
and worrying about, poetry and all that later. So,
Yes, you can do that when you revise.
exactly. So reading a lot and sticking to a practice, just logging the words. That would be
That's
my
great.
biggest advice.
Oh, that's good. And I just want to check in to see if there are any final questions from anybody. No? Great. Well, thank you so much, Dionne, for being here. This
Thank
was
you
so
for having me.
wonderful. Thanks for taking time out of the conference to do this. And I just want to show your book again without the shiny. Okay. Go back and get it. So get your copy of this at the library, at your favorite indie bookstore. It's a fantastic memoir, and I think good for high school students too, Christine. Right? I mean,
It sounds like it is. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
excited to check it out. Yeah.
I think it
The
would be,
the research too, like just your process and everything. Yeah. I'm excited to check it out.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
yeah.
Thanks so
So-
much.
And thank you everyone for being here. I just want to say our next special conversation will be Thursday, March 7th, also via Zoom. And Scott Weinstein, who is the producer of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, will be joining us. So excited for that. And yeah, that'll be on Zoom too. Thank you so much, Dionne. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
Thanks
good
so
you.
much for
night.
having me. This was a pleasure.
Good. I'm so glad. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.